In the spring of 2003, Tyler Edmonds, a boy of only 13 years old, confessed to something that left everyone in shock. He and his half-sister, Christy Fulgham, had killed her husband. What seemed to be a senseless tragedy in an apparently normal home revealed a story of manipulation and betrayal that nobody imagined. But thanks to the courage of Tyler's mother and the tireless efforts of his attorney, the truth came to light, and what appeared to be a tragic accident became one of the most shocking and complex cases in history. This is the case of Tyler Edmonds. Are you ready for the darkest stories Britain has to offer? Introducing our new book, Unreal True Crime, British edition. 35 shocking true murder cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Available now on Amazon in paperback and Kindle, or grab your instant PDF download from our website. Links are in the description below. Don't miss out. Get your copy today. And now, let's continue with today's case. Tyler Edmonds was born on June 14, 1989, in the American state of Mississippi. He was the son of the marriage formed by Sharon Clay and Danny Edmonds. At that time, Danny was already the father of a teenage daughter named Christy, born from a previous relationship. In 1993, when Tyler was about 4 years old, his mother and father divorced, and for various reasons, he was not allowed to maintain contact with his father. As time passed, the boy's desire to see Danny again grew stronger and stronger. It was during this time that Christy became his only refuge. When Tyler was around 12 years old, Christy began organizing weekend meetings so that both could spend time together without the boy's mother knowing. This complicity made Tyler's attachment to his half-sister even stronger. For him, she was the most important person in the world. At that time, Christy was married to Joey Fulgham. The marriage had 3 beautiful children, and in their community, Joey was known for his firm commitment to his family. But despite her husband showering her with love, Christy was not happy. In fact, she began having affairs without discretion. The situation became so serious that the couple appeared on a well-known talk show. During that episode, Christy made a shocking revelation. She openly admitted that her youngest child was not her husband's. Despite this, as she herself acknowledged on the program, Joey decided to continue being that child's father. However, Joey's efforts seemed in vain when around 2002, his wife took the children and moved in with her lover at the time, Kyle Harvey. Yet by May 2003, Christy had returned to live with Joey, and both were trying to save their marriage. Or at least, that's what he believed. Meanwhile, at 13 years old, Tyler was an outstanding student at his middle school. He had no history of violence. He didn't belong to any gang, nor did he show problematic behaviors. On the contrary, he frequently attended his church and respected adults. To those who knew him, he was a kind and affectionate boy, always willing to help and please others. That same kindness, however, would end up becoming his greatest vulnerability. Friday, May 9th of that year, Tyler was excited. His half-sister had promised him that he would spend the weekend at the beach to celebrate Mother's Day together. On the afternoon of that Friday, Christy picked up Tyler and they went to the house where Joey entertained the children and took them to buy food. Upon returning, Joey went to bed while Christy stayed at the computer with Tyler resting near her. In the early morning hours after waking her brother and her children, Christy asked everyone to get in the car while she finished arranging her things to leave. Although Christy took longer than usual to come out, Tyler could only think about how much fun he would have that weekend. After closing the car trunk, she handed him a wallet to store in the glove compartment. Then they took a different route. Christy told him that plans had changed. First, they would go pick up Kyle, and from there, they would travel together to the coast. Once at the beach, they stayed in a hotel, and although she was unemployed, Christy paid for everything with more than $1,000 in cash. While they enjoyed the trip, Joey's brother began to worry. He had spent a good part of the weekend trying unsuccessfully to communicate with him by phone. On Saturday the 10th, his birthday, Joey missed an air show they were supposed to attend together, something completely unusual for him. Sunday, he also gave no signs of life. That's why, by Sunday afternoon, they sensed that something was wrong. His brother went to the house, but no one answered the door. The brother cut through the window screen and entered the house. There, he found a horrifying scene. Joey was lying face down on the bed with no signs of life. Desperate, he called the emergency number. The police arrived quickly. The officers confirmed that Joey had received a gunshot wound to the back of his head, but although they searched the house for evidence, they found no shell casings, nor Joey's wallet. At another point in the city, as they were returning from the trip, Christy's phone began ringing incessantly. After answering, the expression on her face changed. Then she gave Tyler the news of the tragedy. For his part, Joey's brother was direct with the police and said he knew who was guilty. That's how, despite being a grieving widow, Christy became the main suspect. The officers began their search and found her at her mother's house. And although she gave the impression of being innocent, by that time, the police had already gathered enough circumstantial evidence to arrest her. However, she surprised them when she voluntarily presented herself at the sheriff's office with a very disturbing story. What Christy told the police was that Tyler, 13 years old, had become angry when she told him that her husband was abusing her. That night, according to her version, Tyler waited for Joey to fall asleep, went into his room, lifted the rifle, and opened fire. When they heard this, the agents contacted Sharon and asked her to bring her son to make a statement. Once there, the mother was separated, and another officer led Tyler to the interrogation room. That was the beginning of the ordeal. For hours, Tyler denied having anything to do with Joey's death. He didn't understand why they were asking so many questions, but when they told him what Christy had said, he was completely shocked. He couldn't believe that his beloved sister was accusing him of such a horrible crime. The weight of her betrayal felt unbearable. The officers continued pressing him relentlessly. They told him it was better to confess, that Christy had already told them everything, and that this was his chance to tell his side of the story. Tyler, confused, scared, and feeling completely alone, began to break down. He was just a child facing trained interrogators without his mother or an attorney present. The pressure was overwhelming. Finally, after hours of interrogation, exhausted and terrified, Tyler said what they wanted to hear. He confessed. According to his statement, he and Christy had both held the gun together and fired at Joey while he slept. He described details about how it happened, how the pillow was covered in blood, and how they left the scene. The police had their confession. The case seemed closed. But there was something very wrong with this picture. Tyler Edmonds was not a violent child. He had no motive. He had no history of aggression. And most importantly, the physical evidence would soon reveal that his confession couldn't possibly be true. Tyler found himself facing murder charges. At 13 years old, he was looking at spending the rest of his life behind bars for a crime his sister had committed and pinned on him. His mother, Sharon, was devastated but determined. She knew her son was innocent. She knew that Christy had manipulated him, used him, and then betrayed him in the most horrific way possible, Sharon would stop at nothing to save her son. She found an attorney named Steve Faris, a lawyer known for taking on difficult cases and not giving up easily. After reviewing the file, the attorney was certain that this time his client was telling the truth. Tyler wanted to recant his confession, to tell the real story of what happened. But the judge refused to admit the change in Tyler's statement, allowing only the first confession as evidence. When the trial began on July 20, 2004, the experts knew the power that a confession had as a strong piece of evidence, even if there were indications that it was coerced or false. During the development of the process, a highly respected forensic pathologist stated that according to his analysis, the trajectory of the bullet was consistent with Tyler's version. As an expert, he said there were two pairs of hands on the weapon and maintained that this could be deduced from the angle of the wound on Joey's head. In the end, the verdict was devastating: life in prison without the possibility of parole until age 65. The sentence was so harsh that even Joey's family felt compassion for Tyler. Meanwhile, unable to give up, and above all convinced that the errors in the process had been too many, Tyler's lawyer bet that the trial would have to be repeated. Therefore, he continued working on the case. But either way, Tyler remained in the correctional center. As a single mother with limited resources, Sharon had only one option: give up everything to save her son. And that's what she did. Although she would be in debt for the rest of her life, Sharon had no doubt that saving her son was priceless. She would sacrifice everything. She sold her belongings, worked multiple jobs, and dedicated every waking moment to fighting for Tyler's freedom. The appeals process was long and full of defeats. The initial appeal was rejected by the circuit court and then by the state appeals court. Tyler's case generated intense public debate and even prompted new legislation driven by state legislators who considered the sentence too severe for someone so young. His lawyer kept insisting until, in 2007, the ruling was overturned after the judge discovered that the pathologist who had examined Joey's body had acted outside his field of specialization by affirming before the jury that two people had fired the weapon. But the state didn't want a new trial, so they offered Tyler, now 18 years old, a plea deal for involuntary manslaughter. If he accepted it, his sentence would be drastically reduced to the point of getting out of prison in just a few months. On the other hand, if he went to trial again and was convicted, it would be life in prison. In the end, both he and his lawyer decided to fight tirelessly to prove his innocence. Meanwhile, the process against Christy continued, and after her trial, she was found guilty and received a death sentence. Additionally, she was convicted and sentenced to 12 years in prison for convincing two men to help her attempt to escape from jail. The true picture of who Christy Fulgham really was began to emerge. She was not the caring sister Tyler had believed in. She was a manipulator, a sociopath who had used her own brother as a scapegoat for murder. The evidence against her was overwhelming. She had multiple life insurance policies on Joey. She had asked her own father for a gun to kill her husband, even offering him a new car in exchange. She had affairs with multiple men and showed no remorse for her actions. Tyler's new trial began on October 28, 2008. The defense opened the proceedings with a forceful statement, affirming that not only had he been accused unfairly, but that everything had been based on a completely false confession. When it came time to call witnesses, the first person the defense cited was Christy herself. At that moment, everyone in the courtroom held their breath, but with each question, she invoked the Fifth Amendment and refused to answer, following her attorney's instructions. Paradoxically, far from being a setback for Tyler's defense, that stance ended up benefiting him because it allowed the jury to directly perceive Christy's attitude and character. But that wasn't all. The defense presented an unexpected weapon: the video of Christie's television appearance with Joey. That recording exposed her capacity to manipulate, maintaining multiple relationships at once, some even with her husband's knowledge. Then Tyler's lawyer focused on the true motive for the crime. Christie was seeking to collect several life insurance policies in Joey's name. When Danny took the stand, the most explosive revelation came. His daughter had asked him for a weapon to take her husband's life, all to collect the policy. According to his testimony, Christie even offered him a new car in exchange. After that series of setbacks for the prosecution, the prosecutor stood up to present his argument, and the first thing he mentioned was Tyler's confession. He knew it was the most powerful element in his favor. When questioned about it, Tyler was forceful. He had lied to protect his sister, but the prosecutor replied that this only suggested he was also capable of lying to protect himself. With the case against him, Tyler's lawyer requested that an expert on false confessions testify, but the judge denied it. It was a very hard blow for the defense. Even so, the lawyer had one last resource: to use the main physical evidence in favor of his client based on his own account of what he supposedly saw after opening fire. In that initial confession, Tyler described that after the bullet's impact, the pillow was covered with bloodstains. The defense then called another pathologist who declared that the weapon used could not have caused the damage described by Tyler back then. The crime scene photos supported that analysis. There was no trace of blood on the pillows. The scene was immaculate, and there was no evidence of cleanup. On October 31, 2008, the last day of the trial, the judge agreed to let the jury hear Tyler's second statement. There was silence in the courtroom. It was a very intense moment because, for the first time, the jury had access to details like his mention of the gunshot outside the house. Next, Tyler took the stand to reveal that during the trip Christie confessed to him what she had done. Then she described the story she wanted him to tell when the police interrogated them. She even told him she would give him a signal when it was time to change his story and take the blame. So when the police brought her in during the interrogation, he believed that was the signal. He thought he was protecting his sister, doing what she needed him to do. He trusted her completely. Tyler testified about the manipulation, about how Christie had groomed him for years, using their relationship and his love for her against him. He explained how isolated he felt during the interrogation, how scared he was, and how he just wanted it to end. The defense painted a clear picture: a vulnerable 13-year-old boy, desperate for connection with his father's side of the family, manipulated by a cunning older sister who saw him as nothing more than a convenient patsy for murder. Finally, after tense deliberation, the jury found Tyler not guilty. Upon hearing the verdict, the young man embraced his lawyer and his loved ones. Eager to free himself from such a weight on his shoulders, Tyler felt like he was collapsing for the first time in years. Time later, he would still remember those liberating words as if he were hearing them for the first time. When interviewed outside the courthouse, visibly emotional, Tyler thanked God for hearing his prayers and said he was glad to be able to move on with his life. Tyler had to start from scratch, and the first thing he did was leave Mississippi. His story also put under scrutiny the career of the pathologist whose excesses led to the conviction of two other men who were later released in 2008 after their innocence was proven through DNA and the confession of the real culprit. The state of Mississippi removed him from the list of approved pathologists, and several of his victims were released while others obtained new trials. As for Christie, she appealed her sentence, and in 2010 it was overturned. Instead, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As Tyler himself has recounted, the last time he heard from her was at the end of 2008 when she sent him a letter of apology. However, She was not able to tell him exactly what she was apologizing for, which infuriated him. It was typical of Christie. Even in her apology, she couldn't take full responsibility for what she had done. After learning about this shocking story, some experts highlighted how Christie managed to deeply manipulate her brother, using him as a scapegoat. According to these specialists, her behavior showed traits associated with narcissism and sociopathy, lack of empathy, self-preservation instinct, and a tendency to project her guilt onto others. Thus, while most people would seek to protect their loved ones, in Christie's case, her personal interest predominated, evidencing a distorted moral structure capable of considering even the closest relatives expendable. This case raises profound questions about the vulnerability of children in the criminal justice system. Tyler was interrogated for hours without his mother present, without an attorney, by trained professionals who knew exactly how to extract a confession. The fact that a 13-year-old child could be convicted on the basis of a confession obtained under such circumstances is deeply troubling. It highlights the need for better protections for minors in the justice system, including mandatory presence of parents or guardians during interrogations, and better training for law enforcement on the phenomenon of false confessions. Studies have shown that juveniles are particularly susceptible to giving false confessions. They are more likely to be influenced by authority figures, more likely to have difficulty understanding their rights, and more likely to believe that confessing will lead to leniency or that the truth will eventually come out. Tyler's case is a textbook example of these dynamics at play. A vulnerable child, desperate for his sister's approval, isolated from his support system, and facing the overwhelming pressure of law enforcement accusation. The case of Tyler Edmonds is a stark reminder of how easily justice can go wrong, especially when it comes to vulnerable populations like children. It's a story of manipulation, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of a false confession. But it's also a story of hope, of a mother's unwavering love, of an attorney's dedication, and of a young man's resilience. Tyler Edmonds lost 5 years of his life to a crime he didn't commit, 5 years during which he should have been finishing high school, going to prom, starting college, experiencing all the normal milestones of adolescence and young adulthood. Instead, he was locked away, labeled a murderer, facing the prospect of spending the rest of his life behind bars. The psychological toll of such an experience is immeasurable. Yet Tyler survived. He came through the other side, cleared of all charges, able to reclaim his life and his future. He is a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure even the darkest circumstances. As for Christie Fulgham, she remains in prison where she belongs. Her actions destroyed multiple lives. Joey, the husband she murdered for insurance money. Tyler, the brother she manipulated and betrayed. Her own children, who lost both their father and their mother, and countless others touched by this tragedy. Now that you know the details of this tragic story, what do you think? Was it fair that Tyler, being a minor, was interrogated without the presence of his mother or an attorney? To what extent do you think that situation could have influenced his confession and the development of the case? This case should make us all think carefully about how we treat children in the criminal justice system, about the reliability of confessions, and about the evil that people are capable of, even toward their own family members. Thank you for watching this documentary on the Tyler Edmonds case. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below, always with respect for the victims and their families. If you found this content valuable, please subscribe and leave a like until the next story. It was a quiet night in Belglade, Florida. The kind of night when families were settling in and the world outside felt calm. But inside one small home on Southwest Avenue, chaos had taken over. Furniture was overturned. Walls bore the marks of a desperate fight, and the silence that followed was heavier than the humid air outside. When police arrived, they found signs of a struggle so violent it told its own story, one of fear, resistance, and tragedy. But what they would soon discover inside that house went beyond anything they expected. It wasn't just another domestic dispute, it was the final act in a chain of warnings no one had listened to, a moment where every failure came crashing down at once. And at the center of it all was a woman who had done everything right, yet still wasn't safe. This is the story of Shantae Butts, the mother who tried to protect herself and her children, and the system that looked the other way until it was too late. If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers: 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Born in West Palm Beach, Florida, in the early 1990s, Shantae Butts, known to those close to her as Shay, grew up under the bright South Florida sun. Her early years, however, were far from easy. She experienced a childhood marked by movement and uncertainty, transitioning through foster care before finally being adopted. That experience shaped her deeply. She often reflected on what it meant to belong, to have a family not bound by blood, but by choice and love. From a young age, Shantae dreamed of creating the kind of home she never fully had, one filled with laughter, protection, and stability. When she became a mother, that dream became her mission. Her children were her world. Every decision, every hour she worked, every late night she endured was for them. She made sure to be present for their lives, showing up at school events, cheering from the sidelines, and capturing countless moments of joy on social media. Her posts were a window into a life that balanced hard work and family devotion. Her eldest son often appeared beside her, embodying a sense of responsibility beyond his years. Together, they represented what she valued most: unity and perseverance. Despite the chaos of everyday life, she always found time for her family. Behind her smile and humor was a woman who worked tirelessly to build something from nothing. Shantae juggled multiple jobs, often doing the work of 3 people just to make ends meet. She worked as a home health aide, a role that demanded both physical strength and emotional compassion. It was a difficult, often thankless job, yet she approached it with dedication and care. Outside of that, Shantae built her own cleaning company, Polished by Shay, where she transformed homes and earned a reputation for her professionalism and attention to detail. She also explored her creative side through Intucore Creations, crafting striking floral arrangements that combined flowers, liquor bottles, and cash bouquets, each design a reflection of her flair and originality. But Shantae's creativity didn't stop there. She had a magnetic personality that drew people in, and she began sharing snippets of her life online. Her videos mixed humor with honesty, offering a raw, unfiltered look at the realities of motherhood, relationships, and survival. She called herself a comedian, and her humor often carried the weight of truth. Through laughter, she expressed the frustrations and struggles that many single mothers knew too well. Her deadbeat daddy skits became one of her trademarks, funny, unapologetic, and painfully real. In these clips, Shantae used her quick wit to expose the imbalance and emotional labor women often face in relationships. Her followers related instantly. She made them laugh, but she also made them think. Through every post and performance, Shantae shared pieces of herself, the exhaustion, the resilience, and the fierce determination to turn pain into power. She never pretended that life was perfect. Instead, she made her imperfections her strength, showing that even in the chaos of responsibility and heartbreak, there could still be humor, purpose, and beauty. For Shantae, laughter had always been more than humor. It was survival. Her skits, her jokes, her quick wit on camera, all of it was her way of processing the chaos of her life while empowering others who saw themselves in her story. But behind the jokes and the hustle, her purpose was clear. She was a mother first. Every extra shift, every sleepless night, every new business venture was for her children. Her drive wasn't about money or recognition. It was about creating the kind of stability she never had growing up. That focus never changed until she met a man who would alter the course of her life forever. His name was Little Mac Williams, a 46-year-old man who at first seemed like someone who could offer companionship and support. He was the father of her youngest children, and for a time, part of the family she was trying to build. But the relationship quickly began to crumble. What had started as affection soon became disappointment, frustration, and fear. Shantae realized she didn't want that life anymore. She wanted peace, not arguments, not manipulation, and not the exhaustion that came from trying to fix someone who didn't want to change. So she made a brave decision. She left him. She focused on her kids, her work, and even opened her heart again, believing she could start over. But walking away from Little Mac would not be easy. He wasn't ready to let go, and his refusal would soon turn dangerous. Unbeknownst to Shantae at the beginning, Little Mac had a long, violent history. His record revealed a pattern of abuse against women, one that stretched back nearly a decade. In 2014, an ex-girlfriend accused him of sexual battery. Police documented visible injuries, swelling, bruises, and a massive hematoma on her forehead. He was charged with multiple felonies, including domestic battery by strangulation and false imprisonment. Yet, despite the severity of the charges, he served only 36 days in jail. The leniency didn't reform him. It emboldened him. By 2018, another woman came forward, reporting that Williams was stalking her, showing up at her home uninvited, and tampering with her security cameras. He was arrested again, but this time convicted only of trespassing. His punishment? 59 days in jail. By 2023, his violence escalated. During another dispute, he struck a woman in the head with a hard object, sending her to the hospital. Once again, he was arrested. And once again, he spent only 2 days behind bars. Each incident followed the same pattern: violence, arrest, a short sentence, and release. No real accountability, no change. Then came 2024, and Shantae became his next target. In July 2024, she called authorities after Williams forced his way into her home. He put her in a chokehold and kicked her repeatedly until she nearly lost consciousness. When she tried to call 911, he ripped the phone from her hands and fled the scene. Deputies caught and arrested him, charging him with domestic battery by strangulation, witness tampering, and other felonies. He pled guilty, but instead of the years in prison his crimes warranted, he was sentenced to only 157 days and given a no-contact order. But what good is a no-contact order if no one enforces it? By October 2024, Shantae was calling the police again. Williams was stalking her, calling her non-stop, showing up at her door and pounding until she was terrified to even be home alone. He was arrested again for violating the order, but the system failed her once more. In November 2024, he broke into her house, assaulted her, and stole her phone. Prosecutors reduced the charge from felony domestic battery to a misdemeanor. He pled guilty and was sentenced to just 66 days in jail. Despite multiple arrests, convictions, and a clear record of escalating violence, Williams remained free. Free to keep stalking, free to keep threatening, free to destroy yet another life, and Shantae knew it. She wasn't silent about her fear. She warned authorities, she told friends. She even spoke through her comedy, turning her frustration and exhaustion into art. Her viral series, All Deadbeat Daddy, mixed humor with truth, exposing the emotional and physical labor that so many women endure alone. To her followers, it was entertainment, a brutally honest reflection of single motherhood. But to Little Mac, it was something else. He saw those videos not as satire, but as an attack. To him, her jokes were defiance, a public display of independence he couldn't control. What no one realized then was that, behind every punchline, Shantae was also documenting her struggle for survival. And time was running out. For months, tension had been building between Shantae and her ex-boyfriend, Little Mac Williams. What she saw as self-expression, raw, comedic reflections on her life and frustrations. He saw as humiliation. Her videos, filled with laughter and honesty, made people relate to her and love her more. But for Little Mac, they became fuel for rage. He was convinced that she was exposing his secrets, putting his business out for the world to see, and making him look weak. What Shantae meant as empowerment, he twisted into betrayal. By the summer of 2025, that anger had turned into obsession. On July 1, 2025, Little Mac showed up unannounced at Shantae's workplace. She asked him to leave, calmly at first, then with desperation. But her words didn't matter to him anymore. He wasn't listening. What Shantae didn't know that day was that this confrontation was only the beginning, the calm before the storm that was about to consume her life. Just 4 days later, on July 5th, deputies were called once again to her home in Belglade, Florida. This time, the situation had escalated. Little Mac had shown up outside her house in the middle of the night, pounding on her windows, screaming her name, and taunting her about a missing firearm. Shantae was terrified. She told deputies she truly believed he was going to kill her. Those words weren't an exaggeration, they were a warning. That night, she made a choice no woman should ever have to make. She filed another restraining order against him for stalking and harassment, but even with the paperwork in place, she knew it wouldn't stop him. She had seen the pattern too many times before. Later that same night, Shantae checked her doorbell camera, and what she saw made her blood run cold. Little Mac was back. The footage showed him pacing outside, tampering with the camera, lurking just feet from her front door. It wasn't harassment anymore. It was a hunt. Panicked, she grabbed her things and fled to a nearby hotel in Clewiston, hoping that distance and anonymity might buy her a few hours of peace. But even there, she couldn't shake the fear. She posted online about her situation, sharing how the system had failed to protect her. She had done everything right, called police, filed reports, sought protection, yet she still felt alone, unseen, and unsafe. Sadly, she was right, because only 6 days later, her nightmare became reality. On the night of July 11th, 2025, at 11:47 p.m., Shantae's eldest son dialed 911. His voice trembled as he told the dispatcher that his mother's ex-boyfriend had broken into their home through a window. He said the man was yelling, "Where's your mother?" Moments later, his voice cracked. The line filled with screams. And then, silence. When deputies arrived at the home, chaos greeted them. Children were crying, and on her bed, Shantae was unresponsive, shot 12 times. Despite efforts to revive her, she was pronounced dead at 11:58 p.m. But the most horrifying part wasn't just the brutality. It was who had to witness it. All 6 of Shantae's children were inside the house when the shooting happened. Some ran, some hid. Her eldest tried to shield his younger siblings, watching helplessly as his mother gasped for breath, then fell still. Before pulling the trigger, Little Mac reportedly strangled her. One last act of control from a man who couldn't stand to lose power. Outside, the scene was strangely quiet. There was no standoff, no attempt to flee, no trace of remorse. Deputies found Little Mac Williams lying in the street, his hands behind his back, waiting to be arrested. The same man who had terrorized Shantae for years, who ignored court orders and warnings, now surrendered without a fight. A coward finally caught after destroying the very life he once claimed to love. When questioned, Little Mac denied everything. He claimed ignorance, insisted he never fired a gun, and pretended not to know where the weapon was. But investigators saw the truth written on his skin. Scratches covered his face and body, clear signs of a struggle that ended in tragedy. When investigators pieced together the crime, they realized it hadn't come out of nowhere. Every warning sign had been visible for years, every threat had been recorded, every cry for protection filed away. Shantae had done everything she could to stay alive. And yet, the system that should have protected her failed again and again. Detectives began to retrace the long, troubling history of the man known as Little Mac. His record told a story of violence and repeated abuse. Time after time, he had been arrested, released, and allowed to continue his cycle of terror. Shantae had told everyone who would listen that he was going to kill her. She had called deputies, begged the courts for help, and warned her family and friends. She even fled her own home just days before her death, certain he was hunting her down. But no one stopped him. When news of her murder spread through Belle Glade, the community was shaken. Her neighbors described Shantae as a hard-working single mother who poured her energy into her children and her small business. Friends remembered her as determined, creative, and full of life. A woman who always found a way to keep going, no matter how hard things got. Her children were left behind, forced to face a world without their mother. Her oldest son, who had made the 911 call that night, would forever carry the image of what he witnessed. He became the voice that identified the man who took his mother's life, a burden no child should ever bear. For investigators and the community, the arrest of Little Mac brought both relief and anger. Relief that he could no longer harm anyone else, but outrage that it had taken Shantae's death for the system to act. Court records revealed a disturbing pattern. Despite multiple charges over the years, including a conviction for choking Shantae in July of the previous year, his sentences were always short. The longest stretch he had ever served was 157 days. After that, his punishments became lighter with every offense. Strangulation, stalking, break-ins, and death threats, All were documented, and all were met with leniency. Prosecutors reduced charges. Judges issued warnings instead of real punishment, and every time Little Mac walked free. On July 11, 2025, that pattern ended in the worst possible way. Shantae's murder was not an isolated act of rage. It was the final chapter in a story of neglect, a system that chose paperwork over protection. Now, Little Mac sits in the Palm Beach County Jail, charged with first-degree murder with a firearm, attempted murder, and possession of a firearm by a felon. Prosecutors have announced their intent to seek the maximum penalty, citing his violent history and the brutal nature of the crime. For the first time, the justice system seemed ready to take him seriously. But for Shantae's family, it was too late. At a memorial service held in Palm Beach County, friends, relatives, and even strangers came together to honor the 32-year-old mother whose life had been stolen. Her children sat in the front row, holding on to each other as photos of their mother lit up the room. Her oldest son, the same boy who had dialed for help, stood silent, his face a mixture of strength and sorrow. Speakers described Shantae not as a victim, but as a fighter, a woman who created beauty out of hardship, who hustled to provide, and who never stopped believing in a better life for her kids. Her best friend said she was the kind of person who could turn struggle into magic. But as candles flickered and people shared memories, anger simmered beneath the grief. Shantae's family wanted accountability not only for her killer, but also for the system that had failed her. They called out the prosecutors, judges, and agencies that had ignored the signs, allowing a known abuser to keep walking free. For Belle Glade, this was not just another crime scene. It was a reminder of how domestic violence, when minimized, can end in murder. In the weeks that followed, community members organized vigils and rallies, demanding stronger enforcement of restraining orders, harsher sentences for repeat offenders, and more resources for victims trying to escape. Experts pointed out a devastating truth. The most dangerous time for a survivor is when she tries to leave. That is when the threats turn deadly. Shantae's death fit a national pattern, one in which women are told to document abuse, call the police, and get protection orders only to find those protections mean little when enforcement is weak. Across the country, media outlets picked up her story. Advocates highlighted how Shantae had done everything right. She filed reports, she left her abuser, she spoke up. And still, the system failed to save her. Strangulation, one of the crimes Little Mac had already committed against her, is one of the clearest predictors of future homicide in domestic violence cases. Yet even that had been treated as a minor offense. Her death sparked a call for change. Activists and survivors demanded that domestic violence be treated as the serious, life-threatening crime it truly is. They called for courts to stop reducing felony charges, for law enforcement to take restraining orders seriously, and for communities to provide real protection, not empty promises. Shantae should have been safe. She should have been able to raise her children, chase her dreams, and live free from fear. Instead, her life was stolen by a man who should have been behind bars years earlier. But her story did not end with her death. It lives on through the people fighting to make sure no other woman suffers the same fate. In her name, advocates continue to push for reform, to hold authorities accountable, and to remind the world that domestic violence is not a private matter, it's a public crisis. Shantae's legacy is one of resilience, love, and courage. She did everything she could to survive. Now, her community is doing everything it can to make sure her struggle was not in vain. Rest in power, Shantae Butts. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. It was a quiet winter morning in Oregon, cold, still, and ordinary. 13-year-old Miranda Gaddis tied her shoelaces, slung her backpack over her shoulder, and waved goodbye to her mother from the kitchen doorway. She was supposed to meet her friends at the bus stop, like every other school day. But this morning would be different. Somewhere between her doorstep and the corner of the street, Miranda vanished. No one saw her get on the bus. No one saw her walking back home. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed her whole. 2 months earlier, another girl, her best friend, Ashley Pond, had disappeared under almost identical circumstances. The same neighborhood, the same silence. What began as two missing person cases would soon unravel into one of Oregon's darkest and most disturbing stories, a tale of trust, betrayal, and evil hiding in plain sight. If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers: 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Born on March 1st, 1989, in the state of Oregon, Ashley Pond entered a world already marked by change. Her parents, Lowry and Wesley, separated soon after her birth, leaving her to grow up under the care of her mother and, later, a stepfather she believed was her real dad. For years she carried that belief as truth, until one day, the fragile image of her family shattered. Her mother divorced the man, and Ashley learned the painful reality that he wasn't her biological father. In time, Ashley began visiting her real father, Wesley, on weekends. On the surface, she seemed like any other young girl, bright, kind, and full of dreams. She loved hip-hop music, dreamed of becoming a veterinarian, and had a gentle nature that made her easy to love. Her warmth drew people in, though she was often shy around strangers. Among her circle of friends, one stood out: Miranda Gaddis. Miranda, born on November 18, 1988, shared many things with Ashley. They were in the same class, both loved to dance, and were members of their school's dance team. They practiced for hours together, pushing each other to do better. They also lived in the same apartment complex in a quiet suburb southeast of Portland. But behind Miranda's cheerful personality was a childhood marked by trauma far more painful than most could imagine. When Miranda was just 6 years old, in February 1995, her father, Jason, was arrested and later convicted on charges of kidnapping and abusing 2 minors. During his arrest, he used Miranda as a shield, threatening to harm her if the police didn't back away, Officers eventually managed to restrain him and take him into custody. Jason was sentenced to 6 months in jail and 54 years of supervised release. The event tore Miranda's family apart. Her parents divorced, and her mother began a relationship with another man, one who would end up causing even deeper harm. He too abused Miranda and was later convicted. Afterward, Miranda and her siblings were removed from their home and placed in foster care for 18 months. During that time, Miranda received therapy at school to help her recover from the trauma. Through that process, she learned to set strong boundaries and to speak up when she sensed danger, skills that would one day define her character and also, in a tragic twist, lead her into another dark chapter. Meanwhile, Ashley's life began to take its own devastating turn. What had started as innocent weekend visits with her biological father, Wesley, soon became unsafe. On Christmas Eve of the year 2000, after enduring repeated abuse, 12-year-old Ashley finally reached her breaking point. She gathered the courage to tell someone what had been happening. Just 12 days later, on January 5, 2001, Wesley was charged with 40 counts of abuse spanning several years. The case shocked everyone who knew the quiet, affectionate girl with the big smile and love for dancing. Around the same time, a new family moved into the same apartment complex where Ashley and Miranda lived. Their daughter, Mallory, soon joined the same school and quickly became friends with the two girls, eventually joining their dance team as well. Mallory's family included her 19-year-old brother, Francis, and her father, Ward Weber III, along with his partner. It was Ward, Mallory's father, whose presence would later prove pivotal in this story. Born on April 6, 1963, in California, his life had been filled with turmoil from the start. When he was only 4, his father abandoned the family. His mother remarried a man who drank heavily and often became violent. They eventually moved to Oregon, where Ward endured years of physical abuse at the hands of his stepfather. In turn, he began taking out his anger on his younger siblings. By the time he was 15, he discovered that his biological father had been imprisoned for abuse, something his family had tried to hide by telling him his father was away on a trip. The revelation left deep scars. From that moment on, his behavior became increasingly antisocial, setting him on a path that would bring pain to many others in the years to come. In 1981, a teenage girl came forward accusing Ward of abuse. Police opened an investigation, but prosecutors declined to press charges, arguing that Ward would soon be leaving the state after enlisting in the Navy Reserves. His time in the military, however, was short-lived. While serving, he met the woman who would become his first wife, but his career ended abruptly just a year later. He was discharged for heavy drinking and abandoning his post. Back home, the violence that marked his youth began to repeat itself. During his wife's 5th month of pregnancy, Ward attacked her so brutally that she had to be hospitalized. She never filed charges. In December 1982, their son Francis was born. 2 years later, tragedy struck the family again, but this time from another generation. Ward's own father was convicted and sentenced to death for murdering a young couple and burying their bodies in his backyard. Authorities also suspected that he could be responsible for as many as 24 other killings. As if following a doomed pattern, Ward continued down the same destructive path. After moving to California and remarrying, he assaulted a teenage girl and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Upon his release, he settled in Oregon, where he started a small shop with his wife and had more children. But once again, violence found its way into his home. His wife eventually filed for divorce and obtained a restraining order against him. Forced to raise his children alone, Ward soon began another relationship, one that would end like the rest. In 1995, after physically assaulting his new partner, he was sent back to prison. When he was released, she decided not to testify against him. Incredibly, they reconciled and even got married. But stability never lasted long in Ward's life. While working as a mail clerk in a small business, he began seeing another woman and eventually abandoned his wife. At that point, only Mallory, his youngest daughter, lived with him. Francis, then a restless teenager, had gone off on his own. Around the year 2000, however, Francis found himself in serious trouble. He had been caught in another state firing a rifle at a truck full of teenagers. With nowhere else to go, he was sent back to live with his father. In that home, where Mallory's innocence shielded her from recognizing the darkness surrounding her family, Ashley and Miranda spent most of their afternoons. The three girls were inseparable. After school, they would walk together to buy snacks, laugh for hours, and often have sleepovers that lasted late into the night, watching horror movies and whispering secrets. Ward seemed pleased by the visits. By then, his girlfriend had left him, and Francis had moved out again, leaving him alone in the house except for his young daughter and her friends. But in August 2001, that apparent calm shattered when Ashley reported to the police that Ward had tried to assault her. At the same time, Ashley's biological father, Wesley, was awaiting trial for the 40 charges of abuse she had previously brought against him. Desperate to avoid prison, Wesley and his attorney crafted a strategy not based on innocence, but on discrediting Ashley, painting her as unstable and prone to lying. When Wesley learned that his daughter had now accused Ward of assault, he wasted no time. He passed the information to his lawyer, who immediately questioned Ward about it. Ward's response was chilling. He told them he would testify in favor of Wesley and accuse Ashley of making everything up. These manipulative tactics, combined with the defense team's relentless efforts to destroy the girl's credibility, worked. In a plea deal favorable to Wesley, prosecutors dropped all but one charge. He received only 120 months of probation. Ward, on the other hand, faced no legal consequences at all. No one realized on that grim day, when Wesley and his lawyer celebrated their so-called victory, that Ward now felt empowered and enraged. He was free to take revenge on the 12-year-old who had dared to speak out. Then came the morning of January 9, 2002. Ashley left her home to walk to the nearby bus stop, as she did every school day. But that morning, she never arrived. Her trail vanished completely. Despite having no history of running away, police quickly labeled her a runaway case. No large-scale search was organized, and no serious investigation began. Among the friends who joined the family-led search efforts was Miranda. At first, she felt afraid, an unease she couldn't explain, a sense that something far darker was at play. And sadly, she was right. At first, Miranda tried to convince herself that Ashley really had run away. It seemed like the only explanation. After all, Ashley hadn't called anyone, not even her best friends, Miranda or Mallory. Still, something inside Miranda felt uneasy. As the days passed and no one heard from Ashley, that unease turned into fear. The story began to spread through the community, and soon local media picked it up. When interviewed, Miranda spoke about how painful and confusing it all was. To her, Ashley was like a sister. The school's dance team organized a fundraiser to offer a reward for any information that could lead to Ashley's return. Miranda decided to perform a solo routine as a tribute to her missing friend. The performance was set for March 23, 2002. But tragically, Miranda would never get the chance to perform it. On the morning of March 8th, everything seemed normal. Miranda's mother, Michelle, left for work after seeing her 13-year-old daughter in the kitchen getting ready for school. But just after 1:30 p.m., Michelle received a call from her eldest daughter. Miranda hadn't shown up for class. When she called the school to confirm, her worst fears began to take shape. Miranda hadn't attended any of her classes that day. Nearly 2 months had passed since Ashley's disappearance. This time, Michelle didn't hesitate. She immediately contacted authorities. The FBI stepped in, forming a special task force to search for both girls. At a press conference, an FBI spokesperson admitted that investigators now believe the two disappearances might be connected, and that foul play was likely involved. The agency announced a $50,000 reward for information leading to the girls' safe return or to the arrest of whoever was responsible. Posters with the girls' photos were plastered across Oregon, and soon the case made national and even international headlines. In front of countless cameras and microphones, both mothers, Michelle and Lowry, pleaded for help. Michelle insisted her daughter would never have willingly gone with a stranger. Lowry, who had stayed quiet for weeks after losing her daughter, finally spoke publicly, breaking down as she begged for answers. By mid-March, FBI profilers had arrived in the area to assist local authorities. On television, agents urged residents to stay alert and to pay attention to certain behaviors: someone new in the neighborhood, a person showing signs of increased drinking or drug use, or someone who seemed unusually restless, staying up all night. They didn't say why, but the message was clear. The danger might be closer than anyone imagined. Fear quickly spread through the neighborhood. The once lively community, filled with children playing outside and mothers chatting on their porches, turned silent and tense. Parents didn't know what to be afraid of. Was there a stranger lurking near the bus stop? Or was it someone familiar, someone who had knocked on doors that very morning after Michelle had left for work? Some families couldn't bear the uncertainty and decided to move away altogether. One neighbor voiced what many others were thinking. She told reporters she agreed with the mothers. It had to be someone they knew. If a stranger had snatched the girls violently, someone would have seen or heard something. But Ashley and Miranda had seemed to vanish into thin air. Reporters kept digging. Among them was a local journalist who began to sense inconsistencies in the investigation. Two early tips guided her toward a man who had been close to both girls, Ward. When the journalist reached out, Ward agreed without hesitation. Eager to appear innocent, he even invited her into his home and encouraged her to record the conversation. Sitting calmly on his couch, he smiled as he denied knowing anything about the missing girls. His demeanor was disturbingly relaxed. Ward admitted that his past, and his connection to both Ashley and Miranda, made him an obvious suspect, but he insisted he had nothing to hide. Without being prompted, he brought up Ashley's accusation against him, even referencing his own father's violent criminal history. He claimed he wasn't afraid of the FBI and said they could investigate him all they wanted. When the journalist asked where he had been during the girls' disappearances, Ward said simply that he'd been at home. Before leaving, she requested a tour of the house. Ward agreed and began showing her around, starting with the bedrooms. What she didn't know was that behind those calm smiles and confident words, the truth was far darker than anyone could have imagined. As the interview continued, the journalist followed Ward outside to the backyard. He kept talking casually as they stepped onto a patch of freshly poured concrete. The reporter couldn't help but recall the rumors that had been circulating among neighbors, whispers about that strange new slab behind his house. When she asked about it, Ward gave the same explanation he'd been repeating to anyone who would listen. He was planning to install a hot tub. Over the following days, Ward failed 2 separate polygraph tests, though he blamed the results on what he called police incompetence. As the story gained national coverage, he continued to deny any involvement in the girls' disappearances. On a morning talk show, he even accused Lowry, Ashley's mother, of being an irresponsible parent. Despite growing suspicions, several girls from the neighborhood spoke publicly in his defense. They said they had never felt threatened by him. For some, his house even became a place of comfort, a refuge from the fear that gripped the community after Ashley and Miranda vanished. Ironically, because police and reporters were constantly around his property, it seemed to them the safest place to be. To outsiders, Ward appeared quiet and guarded, but Mallory, his daughter, adored him. She couldn't imagine that her father was capable of doing anything truly terrible. Unfortunately, the truth would soon destroy that illusion. On August 13th, 2002, Ward's son Francis called police, claiming his father had tried to assault his 19-year-old girlfriend. But what truly caught investigators' attention was Francis's next statement. He suspected his father might have had something to do with the disappearance of the two missing girls. His reasoning pointed straight to the backyard, the concrete slab. Ward was arrested for the attempted assault, and soon after, police obtained a search warrant for his property. On Saturday, August 24th, 2002, FBI agents launched a full-scale excavation of the house and surrounding land. What they found was horrifying. Inside a shed at the back of the property, agents discovered a microwave oven box containing the remains of Miranda. The next day, they unearthed Ashley's body, hidden beneath the concrete slab in a 200-liter metal barrel, carefully buried and sealed. Both girls were identified through dental records. Investigators learned that 3 days after Miranda went missing, Ward had hired his own son to help prepare the ground for that same concrete slab. Francis dug a large pit, placed metal barrels in it, and covered them with dirt, never suspecting what his father intended to do next. When Miranda disappeared, Ward told his son he would finish the work alone. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. Friends, relatives, and neighbors gathered for a candlelight vigil across the street. Miranda's older sister stayed silent, hidden beneath the hood of her sweatshirt. When she briefly lifted it, her pale face and swollen eyes revealed the unbearable weight of grief her family carried. Meanwhile, Michelle reminded reporters that everyone was also deeply worried about Mallory, who had been placed in temporary state custody following her father's arrest. No one had seen her all weekend. Michelle said she couldn't imagine the torment Mallory must be feeling, mourning her best friends while beginning to realize that her own father might have been responsible. On October 2nd, 2002, Ward was formally charged with abuse, desecration of a corpse, and 6 counts of aggravated murder. Though there were only 2 victims, state law allowed multiple murder charges under different aggravating circumstances. His bail was set at $1 million. From his jail cell, Ward continued to fight. In several interviews, he claimed he was being framed and even showed reporters documents he said proved prosecutors had no direct evidence against him. He accused police of hiding proof that the girls had been killed by members of a drug and biker gang, a bizarre conspiracy theory. Some of his documents did reveal investigative gaps, such as autopsies failing to establish exactly how or when the girls died. Still, the district attorney maintained that the circumstantial evidence was strong enough to convict. As the months passed, Ward's confidence began to crumble. After his televised jail interviews, prosecutors imposed a gag order to stop him from speaking to the media. Soon after, his defense attorneys requested to withdraw from the case, claiming he had stopped communicating with them. When the court denied that request, they argued that their client was mentally unfit to stand trial. During the hearing, Ward sat silently, head bowed. He was sent to the Oregon State Hospital for evaluation. After a short period, doctors declared him competent, and the case resumed. At the August 25, 2003 hearing, the court announced that the trial would be moved to another jurisdiction to ensure impartiality. Ward didn't even attend, showing complete detachment, or perhaps resignation. Finally, in September 2004, during a public court session covered by national media, Ward pleaded guilty to the most serious charges and chose not to contest the rest. He remained silent throughout, answering only direct questions from the judge. Thanks to a plea agreement, he avoided the death penalty and was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Years later, in 2009, Miranda's younger sister visited Ward twice in prison, searching for answers and closure. During those visits, he confessed, not only to killing Miranda and Ashley, but also to planning to murder her next. He told her that on the morning Miranda disappeared, she had walked up the hill toward the bus stop and accidentally witnessed something he was doing. Terrified, she was manipulated into his control. Ward said he used Ashley as bait to lure Miranda closer before carrying out his final deception. As for Ashley, he admitted killing her because he feared she would report him for abuse, a fear that, tragically, became the motive for 2 innocent girls' deaths. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.